Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video, we've got a little bit of news that we need to talk about because you guys, if you've been following my channel and pretty much every single other channel here in the cryptocurrency space, if you've been keeping up with cryptocurrency news at all, you've probably heard of the VanEck SolidX Bitcoin ETF that was proposed earlier on in 2018. This was a very well put together Bitcoin ETF that I've said many times that I thought would go through, would be approved, and when it was approved, would have major bullish implications on the Bitcoin market in the short term and in the long term. But today we've got some bad news because the CBOE has pulled their filing for this Bitcoin ETF, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about exactly why they pulled their Bitcoin ETF filing, and I'm going to be talking about the potential ramifications that this decision is going to have on the longer term timescales here on Bitcoin. We've got a lot to talk about in today's video, guys. Definitely an interesting video here in a sea of uninteresting news coming out of Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks, so I do think this is going to be a good one. If you guys do enjoy today's video, definitely consider dropping a like and hitting that subscribe button. It does help out the channel if you do it. But without much further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. We will do a little bit of short-term TA here to start the video off. There's not a lot to talk about because despite this news, Bitcoin has actually basically been trading sideways. As we can see, Bitcoin is currently, at the time of recording this video anyway, trading around $3,650. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick at the time of recording this video. And like I said, Bitcoin has basically been trading sideways here for the last half of a week or so in this little trading channel above $3,500 and below $3,600 or so, give or take a little bit. I don't really expect this to change in the next little while. We may see another bullish breakout out here as we see Bitcoin has been moving up over the last couple of minutes. If we look here on the minute chart, Bitcoin definitely is looking rather bullish down here on the minute chart, but after all, that is the minute chart, so we'll see what happens there. I could see a little bit of a bullish breakout for Bitcoin coming, but that's not really the TA that we want to talk about in today's video. I want to talk about the longer term technical analysis in today's video, but before we do that, we have to do the crypto market recap and establish why the long-term technicals for Bitcoin have just changed so substantially thanks to this news. Anyway, like I said, Bitcoin is currently trading around $3,600 depending on the exchange you're looking at, down by about 1/3% over the last 24 hours. Nothing really all that important to write home about. We see that Bitcoin Cash is actually above EOS right now. We can see that there's a very close race going on between these two cryptocurrencies in a similar way to how Ethereum and XRP are competing for the number 2 spot. Bitcoin Cash and EOS are competing for the number 4 spot. We sort by change over the last 24 hours here. We're going to see the market is mostly split. The red cryptocurrencies are a little bit more red than the green cryptocurrencies are green. Overall, it's a slightly bearish day for Bitcoin. Nothing really all that substantial, and that's kind of interesting because you guys, this Bitcoin ETF, this news actually broke on the 22nd. I missed yesterday's video. This would have been reported in yesterday's video, so this definitely has had time to play on the market. As you can see, this was updated yesterday, but this was actually originally reported across a lot of different platforms on the 22nd. And the fact that Bitcoin did not actually see a much larger bearish response from this is very interesting. And that's going to tie into what the longer term ramifications of this are. Because a lot of the times when you see a major news article like this break that could potentially have long-term lasting ramifications, I know I've said ramifications about 6 times. I really do like that word. After you see some kind of news break like that has long-term consequences, typically, a lot of those consequences are going to come up front. It might take a little while for them to pop in. It may take a couple days for Bitcoin to crash because of this. But if it crashes from that in a couple of days, it's not really because of this news, is it? Because like I said, normally when you see some kind of big bad news, or in another case, big bullish news come in, normally that will affect the market a little bit sooner than this has. It's a weekday. It's not like this broke on Sunday and we're coming into Monday. This broke on a weekday. So anyway, enough dilly-dallying around. Let's go ahead and get into what the news story is here. What exactly has happened? Well, if you guys have been watching the channel for the last almost 7 months now, I believe the Bitcoin ETF was first filed in July of 2018. The Bitcoin ETF that the CBOE and VanEck and SolidX have put together was a very sound proposal. I was a very big fan of it. It covered a lot of the problems that a lot of other Bitcoin ETFs have been proposing. There were a lot of concerns that the SEC rightfully had about many of these Bitcoin ETFs, having to do with investor protection, having to do with market manipulation. Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market is a very young market, and the SEC's job is to protect consumers. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of whether that's what they should be doing or not. There's definitely a debate there that I would love to weigh in on, but the point of this video is that it is the SEC's job to be careful of these things. It is the SEC's job to review these things and make sure that the general public is not getting screwed over and getting scammed in places like the stock market, in bonds and ETFs, in cryptocurrencies, and anything that the SEC has its hands on. That is their job. So it is understandable that it took this long, because the Bitcoin ETF that the SEC was looking at, this one right here, the VanEck SolidX one, had been delayed and delayed and delayed. And in fact, they were just about to run out of delaying. They're only allowed to delay this cryptocurrency, this Bitcoin ETF 3 times, and that was actually going to expire in February. And this ties back into the news story also, because if you guys have been following normal politics, not just cryptocurrency politics, then you'll probably be aware, American politics I should say anyway, that the American government is shut down right now because of some drama going on in Congress. But what a lot of people were thinking was that, okay, well, the deadline for this Bitcoin ETF being accepted is coming up in early February. If the government is shut down, then the Bitcoin ETF is going to get automatically approved, because if the SEC doesn't deny the Bitcoin ETF by the deadline, then it gets automatically approved. Did that make sense? Let's go ahead and read what Jake Chernovisky, I know how to say his name, he's just got an interesting name. The VanEck SolidX Bitcoin ETF won't be automatically approved just because of the U.S. government shutdown. I've seen a lot of confusion and misinformation about how this shutdown affects the SEC and its processes for handling ETF proposals in general. Just because the U.S. government was shut down does not necessarily mean that this Bitcoin ETF was going to get approved. And since this shutdown may go on for a little bit longer, then a lot of the people in the CBOE and the CBOE in general seem to just not be all that interested in leaving the Bitcoin ETF on the table, getting it approved by default because the SEC is out and not working right now. And then there being a lot of uncharted territory and drama going on after the Bitcoin ETF is by default accepted, and then the SEC didn't want to accept it, but they had to accept it because it was, you guys understand what's going on here. This is an absolute mess. This isn't something that I've ever seen happen to the SEC, where at least in a Bitcoin ETF, at least in an ETF that I've been following. And this is definitely an interesting story. So let's go ahead and talk about this. I'm going to go ahead and read from this article by CNBC, and we also have an article over here by Blocked. I do recommend you guys go and read both of these articles, and all the more articles that you can find, the better, because it's always important to have your information when you're looking at the news in cryptocurrency. Hopes for a Bitcoin exchange-traded fund are being dashed for now. CBOE Global Markets pulled its application on Wednesday for what would be the first ever Bitcoin exchange-traded fund, or ETF, according to a filing with the SEC. The SEC's approval is needed before VanEck and SolidX partners would be able to list their funds on the CBOE's BZX exchange. And yes, the SEC did need to accept this. And yes, this was a very, very sound Bitcoin ETF. I know I've said this already, but I did have a lot of faith in this Bitcoin ETF. I did expect it was going to get accepted. Now, I'm going to be talking about in a little bit, again, like I said, we're going to be talking about the longer term ramifications, but I did expect that this was going to get accepted. But because we've had this government shutdown, because of a lot of drama going on in the SEC, because of a lot of things that I don't have time to get into in today's video, it has not been accepted. And in fact, instead of being accepted or rejected, it has been pulled. Bitcoin advocates have been eagerly awaiting the approval of a Bitcoin ETF, because a lot of people, including myself, have been talking about the major bullish potential that has for an effect on the cryptocurrency market, which many say would usher in new buyers to the struggling asset class. The world's largest cryptocurrency is down more than 80% from all-time high reached during its retail-driven 2017. We all know what happened there. The SEC rejected an ETF by the Winklevoss twins, actually the founders of the cryptocurrency exchange Gemini, to list their shares of a Bitcoin ETF this summer. There's a lot of stuff that we can read into here. The fact is, and what we need to know when we're going on and continuing to do our TA here, is the fact that the Bitcoin ETF has been pulled, largely due to the government shutdown, and there are other factors as well. I'm not just blaming it on that, but this Bitcoin ETF has been pulled, and now if it were to be resubmitted, then the SEC would have another three chances to delay the Bitcoin ETF, meaning that this ETF, if they were to re-register it and repropose it tomorrow, then it would probably be sometime around the end of 2019 before the SEC had to make a final decision, because they could keep delaying it, because they did propose this ETF back over here in 2018, and they've been waiting on an answer that we are now never going to get. So now that we have all that context, and now we know what's going on, now we know that the Bitcoin ETF has been delayed, and now that we, interestingly enough, know that Bitcoin hasn't had much of a reaction to it, what's the long-term implications of this? What's going to happen here now that this Bitcoin ETF has been rejected? Because this was potentially one of the largest bullish news stories that would come out of Bitcoin ever since the beginning of this bear market. This could have been extremely, extremely bullish for Bitcoin if it was accepted. But I also have a counter argument to that, because the interesting thing is This was a very, very bullish news story that could have happened if it were accepted. But I take problem in that due to the fact that we saw basically no bearish price action coming from the rejection, or not the rejection, but the pulling of this Bitcoin ETF. It seems to me, and this isn't going to be a popular opinion, but it seems to me that if this Bitcoin ETF was going to have such a major effect on the market, that we would have seen more bearish price action from it being pulled. That's what I think anyway. I'm surprised that we didn't see more bearish price action. Now, we have seen a little bit of bearishness. Bitcoin had been generally trending down anyway, but we didn't see a massive bearish breakout thanks to this Bitcoin ETF being pulled. Now, I'll let you guys ponder that. I'm not going to comment on that too much, but that is important to note, the fact that Bitcoin did not see more bearish price action coming from that. So let's talk about the longer term implications for Bitcoin. We all kind of, if you guys have been following the channel, if you guys have been doing your own technical analysis on Bitcoin, you're probably aware of my opinion and many others that Bitcoin had been in its consolidation, or not its consolidation, its bearish downtrend, its bear market right here. After we broke below $6,000, we've kind of from then started to enter what I'm calling an accumulation phase that I think is going to last probably through the end of 2019. Probably in the start of 2020, maybe at the end of 2019, we'll start seeing some upwards movement coming out of Bitcoin, some life coming out of Bitcoin, and Bitcoin will start moving to the upside, moving on into 2020, moving on into the hard fork year, and getting on, moving back up towards all-time high over the next couple of years. That's what I think is going to happen here. So the reason I'm bringing that up, and the reason I'm bringing up the longer-term implications for this, is because a Bitcoin ETF being accepted would have been a very major development. It would have meant that there are now millions and millions of people on stock exchanges that can now trade Bitcoin and now have exposure to Bitcoin in a way that they perhaps weren't comfortable with in the past. A lot of people that are in traditional finance markets are not comfortable going and making a Binance account and trading Bitcoin when they've got all their money in 401ks and Roth IRAs and REITs and everything on traditional finance markets, and they're happy with that. So if Bitcoin were to be put in front of them on a traditional finance market, on one of these stock exchanges, on the CBOE, if they were to be put in front of these investors would have been much, much more willing to get into Bitcoin. So the potential bullish upside of the Bitcoin ETF being accepted might not have been all at once from people in the cryptocurrency space getting excited and Bitcoin rocketing to the moon, but what it could have done was change the longer-term trajectory of Bitcoin from something like, say, this to something like, say, this, where we see that a lot more people are getting into the market, a lot more adoption is coming into the market, a lot more volatility and volume and investor interest is coming into the market because Bitcoin has a face on a stock exchange in front of all these people. But now that hasn't happened. But this might actually be a good thing. And you guys know, some people call me a permabull for it, but I also like to look at it as, I'm a very optimistic person. I like to look at the good side of things. So we've talked about the bad side of this, how this is a bad thing for Bitcoin. So let's go ahead and look at the silver lining here, and let's go ahead and close out the video by talking about why this might actually be a better thing. Because an interesting thing happens when you start looking at the longer term technicals for Bitcoin. The fact that Bitcoin was running up so quickly in 2016 and especially in 2017 lends me to believe that we're going to see that happen again. Markets are cyclical. I would bet money, and I am betting money through my investments in Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is going to do something like that again in the next 4 years. I'm very confident in that. I do believe in Bitcoin. I believe in the cryptocurrency space. I believe in blockchain technology, and I do believe that we're going to see another major bull run. But here's the thing. You have to understand something about bull markets and bear markets. During a bull market, and we talk about this in the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy, where we're talking about bull markets and bear markets, we talk about how when you have news in a bull market, when you have bullish news in a bull market, it tends to be very bullish. And when you have bearish news, it tends to not be all that bearish. We saw back over here that there was a lot of FUD coming from China, back over here with China banning Bitcoin for the 11th time over here when Bitcoin was pulling back from $5,000. We saw a lot of bearish news, and people thought that this was the end of the bull rally, and it turns out it wasn't. Bitcoin went and 7x'd from its bottom at $3,000. During bull markets, bullish news tends to be a lot more bullish, and bearish news tends to be a lot less bearish. But the exact opposite is true in a bear market. During a bear market, bearish news tends to be a lot stronger, and bullish news tends to not be all that strong at all. So why am I bringing this up? Well, if we were to see a Bitcoin ETF being accepted right now, it would not have the same kind of impact on the market at a time like this where Bitcoin is, if not bearish, definitely rather neutral. It would not have the same impact now as it would in 2 years when Bitcoin has already started a new bull market and Bitcoin is already rallying and Bitcoin is already moving back towards $20,000 and beyond. So if a Bitcoin ETF doesn't get accepted for the next 2 years and then it gets accepted in an analogous time in the market somewhere like right here, after Bitcoin, let's say Bitcoin's over here somewhere right now, and Bitcoin's already started rallying and moving to the upside, and then a Bitcoin ETF gets accepted, that's going to be a rocket booster put on the back of Bitcoin that is going to send Bitcoin straight to the moon, because that is a very major piece of long-term adoption that Bitcoin needs to go through to become a global cryptocurrency, and to be, well, it's already a global cryptocurrency, but to become a mass adopted cryptocurrency is to be listed on traditional finance markets. So when we see a bull market start, there will probably be a Bitcoin ETF being accepted sometime around then, especially since the most promising one has now been pulled. So that is some very good news in and of itself. We just have to wait a couple of years for that bullish news to come to fruition. Now, I'm not going to say that I am happy about the Bitcoin ETF being pulled. I would have liked that to have been accepted. That could have potentially shortened the Bitcoin bear market, but looking at it pragmatically, looking at it from the long term, perhaps in the future we're going to thank ourselves that it wasn't accepted now, because it will be accepted when Bitcoin is already rallying, and we'll be able to be in a better place to take advantage of it. Anyway, guys, this video was a little bit longer than ones we've done recently. I do apologize for not being a video yesterday. We're going straight back to daily uploads. I'm not going to be missing any more days. I've been very busy with some stuff that you guys are probably going to be getting a peek at eventually. But anyway, guys, that is basically going to do it for today's video. If you are interested in learning more about Bitcoin technical analysis, I do recommend the Cryptocurrency Technical Analysis Academy. You guys know I put that together. I put my heart and soul into it. You guys know how all that goes. If you want to learn TA, I do highly recommend that. But anyway, guys, that is basically going to do it for today's video. I do want to thank each and every single one of you for watching as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.